Welcome to section 11, and in this section we're going to take a look at forms in our application. Now, it's going to be very difficult for you to find a web application to build that doesn't involve forms of some description. If you ever want to obtain information from your users, then forms are going to be what you're going to use to get that information from the user. And let's take a look at the learning goals in this section. And we're going to take a look at forms, but rather than doing it how we looked at them earlier by just using basic React functionality, we're going to add a helper package and we're going to use something called Formic. Now, Formic is the most popular forms library with React just now, and it is very pleasant to use, and also it's written in TypeScript, so we automatically get all of that wonderful type safety, IntelliSense, and autocomplete when we start using it. We're also going to take a look at validation. Now, Formic provides help with validating our form inputs, but we're going to use a library that provides validators that we can use that integrates very nicely with Formic called Yup. And another one of our learning goals for this particular section is to create reusable form inputs. Now, our form inputs are going to have to be styled. They're going to have to be tracked by Formic. They're going to have validation on them if we want to validate on the client side. And they're going to have to notify the user what the problem is if they fail validation. Now, this can be quite verbose if you try and code this all without using something that's reusable. So one of the goals of this course is we're going to take different types of inputs and create reusable versions of them so that we can use them over and over again in our application as and when we need them. And this really reduces the amount of code that we have to write when it comes to adding a form in our application. And we will have a few forms because we are going to introduce things like authentication a bit later on, where we need to take information from the user so they can log in and register to our application. So let's take a look at the before and after of what we're going to achieve here. So this is where we're currently at. We do have a form and we've got inputs that we can type in, and we have a kind of date picker, but this date picker really only works in Chrome. If you try and use a date picker or a HTML5 date picker in Safari, well, good luck with that, because they haven't bothered to implement the date picker. And these forms don't do any validating of the request. And we could submit this and it's going to fail our validation, but we're not even showing the validation from our API. So what we're going to achieve by the end of this section, we're going to have a form that's got fields that are all validated against. So clicking in and clicking outside of a field is going to give us validation errors, and we can update the fields and we can specify options. We've got a drop down for our select option. We've got a date picker for our date that's going to be consistent across all different browsers. We can just type in to the fields, and then our submit button becomes available. And if I remove the text here, then we can see that the submit button is unavailable and we have to complete the field before we can submit. And then we can submit our form just as we've been doing before, and we get the new activity created in our application. And that's what we're aiming for in this section.